Okay, I am officially recording now. Hello, and welcome to another uh, reading session, I should say. Oh, there's my phone. Okay. Alrighty. So let me just do something before we begin. Okay. So last we left off, she talked about Hannah talked to us about, I think it was Marcus. No, it was Zach and, yeah, Zach and Marcus, I think. Yeah, Zach and Marcus, I think. Yeah, it was, yeah, and Marcus wanted to see if the rumors were true about Hannah, but rumors are never true. And then Zach took away her little notes that she got during class. And Clay's listening to the tapes at Rosie's, and Tony is there. We don't know if Tony knows if he knows about the tapes. Excuse me. But I'm starting to think that Clay is getting a feel for if he is in on the whole tapes thing. Which I know, for one, but the truth is, and so will you, hopefully soon. Okay, so let's just start. So this next chapter, hold on. Yeah, this next chapter is called, this next chapter respectively is called Cassette 4, Side B. So now we're on reason number 8. Reason number 8. Then let me see I forget what. Okay, let's just go. Yeah. Respectively, Cassette 4, Side B. Play. Would you want the ability to hear other people's thoughts? Of course you would. Everyone answers yes to that question until they think it all the way through. For example, what if other people could hear your thoughts? What if they could hear your thoughts right now? They'd hear confusion, frustration, even some anger. They'd hear the words of a dead girl running through my head. A girl who, for some reason, blames me for her suicide. Sometimes we have thoughts that even we don't understand. Thoughts that aren't even true. That aren't really how we feel. But they're running through our heads anyway because they're interested in but they're running through our heads anyway because they're interesting to think about. I adjust the napkin holder in front of me till Tony's booth is reflected in the polished silver. He leans back and wipes his hands on a napkin. If you could hear other people's thoughts, you'd overhear things that are true as well as things that are completely random. And you wouldn't know one from the other. It'd drive you insane. What's true? What's not? A million ideas, but what do they mean? I have no idea what Tony's thinking. And he has no idea about me. He has no idea that the voice in my head, the voice coming through this Walkman, belongs to Hannah Baker. That's what I love about poetry. The more abstract, the better. The stuff where you're not sure what the poet's talking about. You may have an idea, but you can't be sure. Not 100%. Each word, specifically chosen, could have a million different meanings. Is it a stand-in, a symbol, and for another idea? Does it fit into a larger, more hidden metaphor? This is the eighth person, Hannah. If it's about poetry, then it's not about me. And there are only 5 names to go. I hated poetry until someone showed me how to appreciate it. He told me to see poetry as a puzzle. It's up to the reader to decipher the code or the words based on everything they know about life and emotions. Did the poet use red to symbolize blood, anger, lust, or is the wheelbarrow simply red because red sounded better than black? I remember that one from English. There was a big discussion on the meaning of red. I have no idea what we decided in the end. The same person who taught me to appreciate poetry also taught me the value in writing. And honestly, there is no better way to explore your emotions than through poetry or audio tapes. If you're angry, you don't have to write a poem dealing with the cause. Yeah, if you're angry, you don't have to write a poem dealing with the cause of your anger. But it needs to be an angry poem. So go ahead, write one. I know you're at least a little bit angry with me. And when you're done with your poem, decipher it as if you just found it as if you'd just found it printed in a textbook and knew absolutely nothing about its author. The results can be amazing and scary, but it's always cheaper than a therapist. I did that for a while. Poetry, not a therapist. Maybe a therapist would have helped Hannah. I bought a spiral notebook to keep all my poems in one place. A couple of days a week after school, I'd go to Monet's and write a poem or two. My first few attempts were a bit sad, not much depth or subtlety, pretty straightforward. But still, some came out fairly well, at least I think they did. And then, without even trying, I memorized the very first poem in that notebook. And no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to shake it from my head even today. So here it is for your appreciation or amusement. If my love were an ocean, there would be no more land. If my love were a desert, you would see only sand. If my love were a star, late at night only light. And if my love could grow wings, I'd be soaring in flight. Go ahead, laugh, but you know you'd buy it if you saw it on a greeting card. There's sudden ache deep inside my chest. Just knowing I'd be going to Monet's to write poetry made the days more bearable. Something funny, shocking, or hurtful might happen, and I think, this is going to make one fascinating poem. Pull over my shoulder, I see Tony walking out the front door, which seems weird. Why didn't he stop to say goodbye? To me, I suppose these tapes are a form of poetic therapy. Through the front window, I catch Tony get in his car. As I tell you these stories, I'm discovering certain things. Things about myself, yes, but also about you. All of you. He flips on the headlights. And the closer we get to the end, the more connections I'm discovering. Deep connections. Some that I've told you about, linking one story to the next, while others I haven't told you about at all. The Mustang shudders as Tony revs the engine. Then slowly, his car backs up. Maybe you've even discovered some connections that I haven't. Maybe you're one step ahead of the poet. No, Hannah, I'm barely keeping up. And when I say my final words, well, probably not my final words, but the last words on these tapes, it's going to be one tight, well-connected, emotional ball of words. In other words, a poem. Watching Tony's car through the window is like watching a movie. The Mustang backing slowly off screen, but the headlights won't gradually fade away, which they should if he kept backing up or turned away. Instead, they just stop, as if turned off. Looking back, I stopped writing in my notebook when I stopped wanting to know myself anymore. Is he out there, sitting in his car waiting? Why? If you hear a song that makes you cry and you don't want to cry anymore, you don't listen to that song anymore. But you can't get away from yourself. You can't decide not to see yourself anymore. You can't decide to turn off the noise in your head. Pause. With Tony's headlights turned off, the windows of the diner are just a stretch of black glass. Every so often, at the far end of the parking lot, a car drives down the road, and a sliver of light glides from one end of the glass to the other. But the only steady source of illumination, though distant, appears to be the upper right-hand corner, a blurry pink and yellow light. The tip of the Crestmont's neon sign peeking over the rooftops of every business around it. God, what I wouldn't give to relive that summer. When we were alone, it was so easy to talk to Hannah. It was so easy to laugh with her, but whenever people came around, I got shy, I backed off. I didn't know how to act anymore. In that tiny fishbowl box office, My only connection to my coworkers in the lobby was the red phone. No buttons to punch, just a receiver. But whenever I picked it up and it was Hannah. Yeah, but whenever I picked it up and Hannah answered on the other end, I got nervous, as if I wasn't calling from 30 feet away, but calling her at home. I need to change. I need change, I would say. Again? She'd respond, but always with a smile on her voice. And every time, I felt my face grow warm with embarrassment. Because the truth was, I asked for change a lot more when she was working than when she wasn't. A couple of minutes later, there'd be a knock on the door, and I'd straighten my shirt and let her in. With a tiny cash box in hand, she'd squeeze by me, agonizingly close, to change some of my bills. And sometimes, on slow nights, she would sit in my chair and tell me to close the door. Whenever she said that, I struggled to keep my imagination in check, because even though windows kept us exposed on three sides, like attractions in a carnival, and even though she only said it because we weren't supposed to leave the door open, anything could happen within that cramped space, or so I wished. Those moments, however brief and rare, made me feel so special. Hannah Baker chose to spend her free moments with me, and because we were at work, no one would think anything of it. No one could read into it. But why? Why, whenever anyone saw us, did I pretend it meant nothing? We were working. That's what I wanted them to believe. Not hanging out, just working. Why? Because Hannah had a reputation that scared me. That first, that truth first came to light a few weeks ago, at a party with Hannah directly in front of me. An amazing moment when everything seemed to be falling in place. Looking down into her eyes, I couldn't help telling her I was sorry. Sorry for waiting so long to let her know how I felt. In a brief moment, I was able to admit it. To her, to myself, but I could never admit it again. Till now. Now, it's too late. And that's why, right at this moment, I feel so much hate towards myself. I deserve to be on this list. Because if I hadn't been so afraid of everyone else, I might have told Hannah that someone cared. And Hannah might still be alive. I pull my gaze back from the neon sign. Play. Sometimes I would stop by a Monet's for a hot chocolate on my way home. I'd start my homework, or sometimes I'd read, but I wasn't writing poetry anymore. I needed a break for myself. I slide my hand from under my chin to the back of my neck. The bottom strands of my hair are drenched in sweat. But I loved poetry. I missed it, and one day, after several weeks, I decided to go back. Decided to use poetry to make myself happy. Happy poems, bright and happy, sunshiny poems, happy, 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 like the two women pictured on the flyer at Monet's. They taught a free course called Poetry to Love Life. They promised to teach not only how to love poetry, but through poetry, how to better love ourselves. Sign me up. D7 on your map. The community room at the public library. The community room at the public library. It's too dark to go there now. The poetry class began at the same time the last bell rang at school, so I'd race over there to try and make it without being too late. But even when I was late, everyone seemed happy to have me there, to provide the feminine teen perspective, they called it. Looking around, I see that I'm the only one left in Rosie's. They don't close for another 30 minutes, and even though I'm not eating or drinking anymore, the man behind the counter hasn't asked me to leave, so I'll stay. Imagine 10 or 12 orange chairs arranged in a circle, with a happy woman from the flyer sitting at opposite ends. Only problem was, from day one, they weren't happy. Someone, whoever made that flyer, must have digitally turned their frowns upside down. They wrote about death, about the evilness of men, about the destruction of, and I quote, the greenish, bluish orb in wisps of white. Seriously, that's how they described it. They went on to call the Earth a knocked up, gaseous alien needing an abortion. Yeah, they went on to call Earth a knocked up, gaseous alien needing an abortion. Another reason I hate poetry. Who says orb instead of ball or sphere? Expose yourself, they said. Let us see your deepest and darkest. My deepest and darkest? What are you, my gynecologist? Hannah. So many times I wanted to raise my hand and say, so when do we get to the happy stuff? The stuff about loving life? Poetry to love life? That's what the flyer said. That's why I'm here. In the end, I only made it through 3 of those poetry groups, but something did come of it. Something good? No. I wonder. See, everyone else was in that group. Yeah, see? Someone else was in that group. Another high schooler with a perspective adored by the older poets. Who was it? The editor of our school's very own Lost and Found Gazette, Ryan Shaver. You know who I'm talking about, and I'm sure you, Mr. Editor, can't wait for me to say your name out loud. So here you go, Ryan Shaver. The truth shall set you free. The motto of the Lost and Found. You've known this for a while, Ryan. I'm sure of it. At the first mention of poetry, you knew this one was about you. You had to. I'm sure you must have thought, this can't be why I'm on the tapes. It wasn't a big deal. The poem from school. God, it was hers. Remember, this is one tight, well-connected, emotional ball I'm constructing here. I close my eyes tight, covering my eyes with my hands. I crush my teeth together, jaw muscles burning to keep from screaming or crying. I don't want her to read it. I don't want to hear that poem in her voice. Would you like to hear the last poem I wrote before quitting poetry? Before quitting poetry for good? No? Fine. But you've already read it. It's very popular at our school. I allow my eyelids, my jaw to relax. The poem. We discussed it in English. We read it aloud many times. And Hannah was there for it all. Some of you may recall it now. Not word for word, but you know what I'm talking about. The Lost and Found Gazette, Ryan's semi-annual collection of items found lying around on campus. Like a love letter tossed under a desk, never discovered by its intended love. If Ryan found it, he'd scratch out the giveaway names and scan it for use in an upcoming Gazette. Photographs that fell out of binders, he scanned them too. History notes covered in doodles by an extremely bored student, he scanned them. Many people may wonder how Ryan found Yes, some people may wonder how Ryan found so many interesting items to scan. Did he really find them all? Or did he steal them? I asked him that very question after one of our poetry meetings, and he swore that everything he printed was found purely by chance. Sometimes, he admitted, people did slip items they found into his locker. Those, he said, he couldn't vouch for 100%. That's why he scratched out names and phone numbers and photographs as a rule. Who and photographs as a rule couldn't be too embarrassing. He'd gather 5 or 6 pages of good, quirky material and print up 50 copies. Then he'd staple them together and drop them at random places throughout the school. Restrooms, locker rooms, on the track. Never in the same spot, he told me. He thought it was fitting for people to stumble across his magazine stumbled across items. But guess what? My poem, he stole it. I put a napkin over the holder and wiped the abrasive paper across my eyes. Each week after our poetry group, Ryan and I would sit on the library steps and talk. That first week, we simply laughed at the poems that other people had written and read. We laughed at how depressing they all were. Wasn't this supposed to make us happy? He asked. Apparently, he signed up for the same reason as me. I look up. The man behind the counter tugs on the strings of a heavy trash bag. It's closing time. Can I get a glass of water? I ask. After the second week of class, we sat on those library steps and read some of our poems to each other. Poems? Hold on. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, after the second week of class, we sat on those library steps and read some of our own poems to read to each other. Poems we'd written at different points in our lives. He looks at my eyes, at the skin rubbed raw by the napkin. But only happy poems. Poems about living life. Poems we would never read to that depression-loving group of miserable poets inside. And, as poets never do, we explained ourselves, line for line. Hold on just 1 second. I need chapstick. There we go. I found the chapstick. Okay. Uh, yeah, and as poets never do, we explain ourselves, line for line. The third week, we took the biggest chance of all and handed each other our entire notebooks of poetry. He pushes a glass of ice water in front of me. Except for the glass and the napkin dispensers, the entire length of the counter is empty. Wow, that took a lot of courage. From me, definitely. I'm sure for you too, Ryan. And for the next 2 hours, with the sun going down, we sat on those concrete steps, turning pages. His handwriting was horrible, so it took me a bit longer to read through his poems, but they were amazing. much deeper than any of mine. His stuff sounded like real poetry, professional poetry, and someday I'm sure of it. Kids will be forced to analyze his poems out of a textbook. I touch my cold glass, wrapping my fingers around it. Of course, I had no idea what his poems meant. Not exactly. But I felt the emotions precisely. They were. They were absolutely beautiful. And I felt almost ashamed of what he must have been thinking as he went through my notebook. Because reading through his, I realized how little time I'd spent on mine. I should have taken the time to choose better words, more emotional words. But one of my poems grabbed him, and he wanted to know more about it, like when I wrote it. But I didn't tell him. I don't drink the water. I watch a single drop slide down the glass and bump against my finger. I wrote it the same day a group of students got angry that someone had the nerve to ask for help regarding suicide. Remember Remember why they got upset? Because whoever wrote that note didn't sign her name. How insensitive. It was anonymous, just like the poem that appeared in The Lost and Found. So Ryan wanted to know why I wrote the poem. With that one, I told him the poem had to speak for itself, but I was interested in knowing what he thought it meant. On the surface, he said the poem was about acceptance. Acceptance from my mother, but more than that, I wanted her approval. I wanted certain people, in this case a boy, to stop overlooking me. A boy? At the base of the glass, the water creates a delicate section that lets go. As I take a sip and let a small cube of ice slip into my mouth. I asked if he thought it meant anything deeper. I hold the ice on my tongue. It's freezing, but I want it to melt here. But I want it to melt there. Part of me was joking. I thought he'd figured out my poem exactly. But I wanted to know what a teacher assigning the poem might want his or her students to discover, because teachers always overdo it. But you found it, Ryan. You found the hidden meaning. You found what even I couldn't find in my own poem. The poem wasn't about my mom, you said, or a boy. It was about me. I was writing a letter to myself, hidden in a poem. I flinched when you told me that. I got defensive, even angry. But you were right, and I felt scared and sad by my own words. You told me I wrote that poem because I was afraid of dealing with myself, and I used my mom as an excuse, accusing her of not appreciating or accepting me when I should have been saying those words into a mirror. And the boy? I asked. What does he represent? It's me. Oh God, it's me. I know that now. I cover my ears, not to block any outside noise. The diner is almost completely silent, but I want to feel her words, all of them, as they're said. While I waited for your answer, I searched my backpack for a tissue. At any moment, I knew I might cry. You told me that no boy was overlooking me more than I was overlooking myself. At least that's what you thought it meant, and that's why you asked about the poem. You felt it went deeper than even you could figure out. Well, Ryan, you were right. It went much, much deeper than that. And if you knew that, if that's what you thought, then why did you steal my notebook? Why did you print my poem, the poem that you yourself called scary and The Lost and Found? Why did you let other people read it and dissect it and make fun of it? It was never a lost poem, Ryan, and you never found it, so it did not belong in your collection. But in your collection is exactly where other people found it. That's where teachers stumbled across it right before their lectures on poetry. That's where classrooms full of students caught up my poem, searching for its meaning. In our class, no one got it right, not even close, but at the time, we all thought we did, even Mr. Porter. Do you know what Mr. Porter said before handing out my poem? He said that reading a poem by an unknown member of our school was the same as reading a classic poem by a dead poet. That's right, a dead poet. Because we couldn't ask either one about its true meaning. Then Mr. Porter waited, hoping someone would fess up to writing it. But that, as you know, never happened. So now you know. And for those of you who need a refresher, here it is. Soul Alone by Hannah Baker. I meet your eyes. You don't even see me. You hardly respond when I whisper, hello. Could be my soulmate, two kindred spirits. Maybe we're not. I guess we'll never know. My own mother, you carried me in you. Now you see nothing but what I wear. People ask you how I am doing. You smile and nod. Don't let it end there. Put me underneath God's sky and know me. Don't just see me with your eyes. Take away this mask of flesh and bone and see me for my soul alone. And now you know why. So, did your teachers dissect me properly? Were they right? Did you have any clue at all it was me? Yes, some of you did. Ryan must have told someone, proud that his collection made it into the curriculum. But when people confronted me, I refused to confirm it or deny it, which pissed some of them off. Some even wrote parodies of my poem, reading them to me in hopes of getting under my skin. I saw that. I watched two girls in Mr. Porter's class recite a version before the bell rang. It was all so stupid and childish and cruel. They were relentless, bringing new poems every day for an entire week. Hannah did her best to ignore them, pretending to read while waiting for Mr. Porter to arrive, for the start of class to come to rescue her. This doesn't seem like a big deal, does it? No, maybe not to you, but school hadn't been a safe haven of mine for a long time. And after your photo escapades, Tyler, my home was no longer secure. Now suddenly, even my own thoughts were being offered up for ridicule. Once in Mr. Porter's class, when those girls were teasing her, Hannah looked up. Her eyes caught mine for just a moment, a flash, but she knew I was watching her, and even though no one else saw it, I turned away. She was on her own. Very nice, Ryan. Thank you. You're a true poet. Stop. I pull the headphones out of my ears and hang them around my neck. I don't know what's going on with you, the man says from across the counter, but I'm not taking your money. He blows into a straw and pinches both ends. I shake my head and reach back for my wallet. No, I'll pay. He winds the straw tighter and tighter. I'm serious. It was only a milkshake, and like I said, I don't know what's going on, and I don't know how I can help, but something's clearly gone wrong in your life, so I want you to keep your money. His eyes search mine, and I know he means it. I don't know what to say. Even if the words would come, my throat is so tight, it won't let them escape. So I nod, grab my backpack, and change the tape as I head for the door. And that is the end of that chapter. Now we get on to chapter 7. No, chapter 9? Yeah, chapter 9. Okay. Chapter 9, respectively, is called. Hold on, let me just get some more. Excuse me. Yeah, I think this is where it actually goes. Hold on. Oh. Hold on. Okay. And then. Okay. This is the moment. Alright. So this one is called, um, respectively, Cassette 5, Side A. Cassette 5, Side A. The glass door to Rosie's closes behind me, and I hear 3 locks immediately slide into place. So now where? Home? Back to Monet's? Or maybe I'll go to the library after all. I can sit outside on the concrete steps, listen to the remainder of the tapes in the dark. Clay! It's Tony's voice. Bright headlights flash 3 times. The driver's side window is down, and Tony's outstretched hand waves me over. I tug the zipper on my jacket up and walk over to his window. But I don't lean in. I don't feel like talking. Not now. Tony and I have known each other for years, working on projects and joking after class, and joking around after class. And all that time, we've never had a deep conversation. Now I'm afraid he wants to have one. He's been sitting here this whole time, just sitting in his car, waiting. What else could be on his mind? He won't look at me. Yeah, he won't look at me. Instead, he reaches out to adjust the side mirror with his thumb. Then he closes his eyes and lets his head fall forward. Get in, Clay. Is everything all right? After a short pause, slowly he nods. I rock around the front of his car, open the passenger door, and sit, keeping one foot out on the blacktop. I place my backpack, with Hannah's shoebox inside, on my lap. Shut the door, he says. Where are we going? It's okay, Clay. Just shut the door. He winds the handle on his door, and his window slides up. It's cold outside. I'm going to end you. Damn, that's very ominous and very scary. He would not do that though. Tony's good. Tony's good. Uh, okay. Unless he's on the tapes. Oh my god, maybe he is on the tapes. Shoot, man. And maybe he doesn't know? Because, I mean, we haven't heard his tape. So that means he hasn't yet heard his tape yet. Yeah, oh my god. It's gonna be a whammy. Double whammy. It's cold outside. His gaze slips from the dashboard to the stereo to his steering wheel, but he won't face me. The moment I pull the door shut, like the trigger on a starting pistol, he begins. Oh shit, it just goes straight to it. Oh god. Okay. Yeah, the moment I pull the door shut, like the trigger on a pistol, he begins. You're the 9th person I've had to follow, Clay. What? What are you talking about? The second set of tapes, he says. Hannah wasn't bluffing. I've got them. Oh god. I cover my face with both hands. Behind my eyebrow, the pounding is back. Behind my eyebrow, the pounding is back again. With the base of my palm, I press on it hard. It's okay, he says. I can't look at him. What does he know? About me? What has he heard? What's okay? What's okay? What were you listening to in there? What? Which tape? I can try and deny it, pretend I have no clue what he's talking about, or I can get out of his car and leave. But either way, he knows. It's okay. It's okay, Clay. Honest. Which tape? With my eyes still shut, I press my knuckles against my forehead. Ryan's, I say. The poem. Then I look at him. He leans his head back, eyes closed. What? I ask. No answer. Why'd she give them to you? He touches the keychain dangling in the ignition. Can I drive while you listen to the next tape? Tell me why she gave them to you. I'll tell you, he says, if you'll just listen to the next tape right now. Why? Clay, I'm not joking. Listen to the tape. Then answer my question. Because it's about you, Clay. He lets go of his keys. The next tape is about you. He's next. Yeah. He's next. What did Clay do, man? Oh, man. What did he do? The next tape is about you. Nothing. My heart doesn't jump. My eyes don't flinch. I don't breathe. And then I snap my arm back, my elbow into the seat. Then I smash it into the door, and I want to pound my head sideways into the window. But I pound it back against the headrest instead. Tony lays a hand on my shoulder. Listen to it, he says. And don't leave this car. He turns the ignition. With tears falling, I roll my head to his face, but he's staring straight ahead. I open the door of the Walkman and pull out the tape, the 5th tape, a dark blue number 9 in the corner. My tape. I am number 9. I drop the tape into the Walkman and, holding the player in both hands, close it like a book. Tony puts the car in gear and drives through the empty parking lot, heading for the street. Without looking, I run my thumb across the top of the Walkman, feeling for the button that brings me into the story. Play. Romeo, oh Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? My story, my tape. This is how it begins. Good question, Juliet. And I wish I knew the answer. Tony shouts over the engine. Clay, it's okay. To be totally honest, there was never a point where I said to myself, Clay Jensen, he's the one. Just hearing my name. The pain in my head doubles. I feel an agonizing twist in my heart. I'm not even sure how much of the real Clay Jensen I got to know over the years, but of what I knew was secondhand information, and that's why I wanted to know him better, because everything I heard, and I mean everything, was good. It was one of those things where once I noticed it, I couldn't stop noticing it. Kristen Renner, for example, she always wears black pants or black shoes, black shirt. If it's a black jacket and that's the only black she's wearing, she won't take it off all day. The next time you see her, you'll notice it, and then you won't be able to stop noticing it. Steve Oliver's the same way. Whenever he raises his hand to say something or asks a question, he always begins with the words, all right. Mr. Oliver? All right. If Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner, Mr. Oliver? All right. I got 76.1225. Mr. Oliver? All right. Can I have a hall pass? Seriously. Every time. And now you'll notice it too. Every time. Yes, I've noticed it, Hannah. But let's get on with it, please. Overhearing gossip about Clay became a similar distraction. And like I said, I didn't know him very well, but my ears perked up whenever I heard his name. I guess I wanted to hear anything juicy. Not because I wanted to spread gossip, I just couldn't believe someone could be that good. I glance at Tony and roll my eyes, but he's driving, looking straight ahead. If he was actually that good, wonderful, great, but it became a personal game of mine. How long could I go on hearing nothing but good things about Clay Jensen? Normally, when a person has a stellar image, another person's waiting in the wings to tear them apart. They're waiting for that one fatal flaw to expose itself. But not with Clay. Again, I look over at Tony. This time, he's smirking. I hope this tape doesn't make you run out and dig for that deep, dark, and dirty secret of his, which I'm sure there is. At least one or two of them, right? I've got a few. But wait, isn't that what you're doing, Hannah? Oh, wait. Isn't that what you're doing, Hannah? You're setting him up as Mr. Perfect, only to tear him down. You, Hannah Baker, were the one waiting for the wings, waiting for a flaw, and you found it. And now you can't wait to tell everyone what it is and ruin his image. To which I say, no. My chest relaxes, fraying a breath of air I didn't even know I was holding. And I hope you're not disappointed. I hope you aren't just listening, salivating for gossip. I hope these tapes mean more to you than that. Clay, honey, your name does not belong on this list. I lean my head against the window and close my eyes, concentrating on the cold glass. Maybe if I listen to the words, but concentrate on the cold, maybe I can hold it together. You don't belong in the same way as the others. Yeah. That it is a twist, and you're gonna find out why he doesn't. But he's on here for a reason. Just not the reason you'd expect. You don't belong in the same way as the others. It's like that song. One of these things is not like the others. One of these things just doesn't belong. And that's you, Clay. But you need to be here if I'm going to tell my story. To tell it more completely. Pause. Why do I have to hear this? I ask. Why didn't she just skip me if I don't belong? Tony keeps driving. If he looks anywhere other than straight ahead, it's only briefly into the rearview mirror. I would have been happier never hearing this, I say. Tony shakes his head. No. It would drive you crazy not knowing what happened to her. I stare through the windshield at the white lines glowing in the headlights and realize he's right. Besides, he says, I think she wanted you to know. Maybe, I think. But why? Where are we going? He doesn't answer. Play. Yes, there are some major gaps in my story. Some parts I just couldn't figure out how to tell, or couldn't bring myself to say out loud. Events I haven't come to grips with, that I'll never come to grips with, and if I never have to say them out loud, then I never had to think them all the way through. But does that diminish any of your stories? Are your stories any less meaningful because I'm not telling you everything? No. Actually, it magnifies them. You don't know what went on in the rest of my life. At home, even at school. You don't know what goes on in anyone's life but your own. And when you mess with one part of a person's life, you're not messing with just that part. Unfortunately, you can't be that precise and selective. When you mess with one part of a person's life, you're messing with their entire life. Everything affects everything. The next few stories are centered around one night. The party. They're centered around our night, Clay. And you know what I mean by our night, because through all the years we've spent going to the same school or working together at the movie theater, there's only one night when we connected. When we really connected. That night drags many of you into the story as well. One of you for the second time. A random night that none of you can take back. I hated that night. Even before these tapes, I hated it. That night, I ran into an old woman that her husband was fine. That night I ran to tell a woman that her husband was fine. Everything was going to be fine. But I was lying. Because while I was running to comfort his wife, the other driver was dying. And the old man, by the time he got home to his wife, he knew it. Hopefully, no one will hear these tapes except for those of you on this list. Leaving any changes they will bring to you. Hopefully no one on these tapes. Hopefully no one will hear these tapes except for those of you on the list. Leaving any changes they bring to your lives completely up to you. Of course, if the tapes do get out, you'll have to deal with consequences completely out of your control. So I sincerely hope you're passing them on. I glance at Tony. Would he really do that? Could he? Would he give the tapes to someone not on the list? Who? For some of you, These consequences might be minimal, maybe shame or embarrassment, but for others, it's hard to say. A lost job, jail time. Let's keep this between us, shall we? So, Clay, I wasn't even supposed to be at that party. I was invited, but I wasn't supposed to be there. My grades were slipping pretty fast. My parents asked for progress reports every week from my teachers, and when none of them came back with improvements, I was grounded. For me, grounded meant that I had 1 hour to get home from school, 1 hour being my only free time until I brought those grades up. We're at a stoplight, and still, Tony keeps his eyes straight ahead. Does he want to avoid seeing me cry? Because he doesn't have to worry. I'm not. Not right now. During one of my during one of my Clay Jensen gossip moments, I found out that you were going to be at that party. What? Clay Jensen at a party? Unheard of. I study on the weekends, and most of my classes were tested every Monday. It's not my fault. Not only was that my first thought, that's what the people around me were talking about too. No one could figure out why they never saw you at parties. Of course, they had all sorts of theories. But guess what? That's right. None of them were bad. Give me a break. As you know, since Tyler's not tall enough to peep through a second-story window, sneaking out of my bedroom wasn't hard to do. And that night, I just had to do it. But don't jump to conclusions. I've snuck out of my house before that night. Only twice. Okay, 3 times, 4, maybe 4 tops. For those of you who don't know which party I'm talking about, there's a red star on your map. A big, fat, red star. Completely filled in. C6. 512 Cottonwood. Is that where we're going? So now you know. Now some of you know exactly where you fit in, but you'll have to wait until your name pops up to hear what I'm going to tell. To hear how much I tell. That night, I decided that walking to the party would be nice, relaxing. We had a lot of rain that week, and I remember the clouds were still hanging low and thick. The air was warm for that time of night too. My absolute favorite type of weather. Mine too. Pure magic. It's funny, walking by the houses on my way to the party, it felt like life held so many possibilities. Limitless possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. And so did I. I forced myself out of the house and to that party. I wasn't ready for something new to happen. Something exciting. Hope? Well, I guess I misread things a bit. And now, knowing what happened between Hannah and me, would I still have gone? Even if nothing changed? It was simply the calm before the storm. I would. Yes, even if the outcome stayed the same. I wore a black shirt with a matching hooded pullover, and on my way there, I took a 3-block detour to my old house, the one I lived in when we first moved to town. The first red star, yeah, the first red star, uh, yeah, and on my way there, I took a 3-block detour to my old house, the one I lived in when I first moved to town. The first red star from the first side of the first tape. The porch light was on, and in the garage, the car's engine was running, but the garage door was shut. Am I the only one who knows this? Does anyone else know that's where he lived? The man from the accident? The man whose car killed a student from our school? I stopped walking and, for what seemed like several minutes, just watched from the sidewalk, mesmerized. Another family in my house. I had no idea who they were or what they were like, what their lives were like. The garage door began to lift, and in a glow of red taillights, the silhouette of a man pushed a heavy door. The silhouette of a man pushed the heavy door all the way up. He got in the car, backed it down the driveway, and drove off. Why did he stop? Why didn't he ask why I was standing there staring at his house? I don't know. Maybe he thought I was waiting for him to back out of the driveway before continuing on my merry way. But whatever the reason, it felt so surreal. Two people, me and him, one house. Yet he drove away with no idea of his link to me, the girl on the sidewalk. And for some reason, at that moment, the air felt heavy, filled with loneliness. And that loneliness stayed with me through the rest of the night. Even the best moments of the night were affected by that one incident, by that non-incident in front of my old house. His lack of interest in me was a reminder. Even though I had a history in that house, it didn't matter. You can't go back to how things were, how you thought they were. All you really have is now. Those of us on the tapes, we can't go back either. We can never not find a package on our doorstep or in our mailbox. From that moment on, we're different. Which explains my overreaction, Clay. And that's why you'll get these tapes. To explain, to say I'm sorry. Does she remember? Does she remember that I apologized to her that night? Is that why she's apologizing to me? The party was well underway by the time I got there. Most people, unlike me, didn't have to wait for their parents to fall asleep. The usual crowd hung out by the front door of the party, drunk out of their minds, greeting everyone with a raised cup of beer. I would think Hannah would be a hard name to slur, but those guys did it pretty well. Half of them kept repeating my name, trying to get it right, while the other half laughed. But they were harmless. Fun drunks make a nice addition to any party. Not looking to fight, not looking to score, just looking to get drunk and laugh. I remember those guys, like the mascots of the party. Clay, what you doing here? Bah ha ha ha. The music was loud and no one was dancing. It could have been a party, except for one thing. Clay Jensen. I'm sure you've heard a lot of sarcastic remarks when you first arrived, but by the time I got there, to everyone else, you were just a part of the party. But unlike everyone else, you were the whole reason I came. With everything going on in my life, going on in my head, I wanted to talk with you. Really talk. Just once. A chance we never seem to get at school or at work. A chance to ask, who are you? We didn't get that chance because I was afraid. Afraid I had no chance with you. That's what I thought. And I was fine with that. Because what if I got to know you and you turned out to be just like what... And you turned out to be just like... Because what if I got to know you and you turned out to be just like... I don't know why this is so hard for me. Okay, that's what I thought. And I was fine with that. Because what if I got to know you and you turned out to be like they said? What if you weren't the person I hoped you were? That, more than anything, would have hurt the most. And as I stood in the kitchen and line to fill my cup for the first time, you walked up behind me. Hannah Baker, you said, and I turned toward you. Hannah, hey. When she first arrived, she walked through the door. She caught me off guard, and like a freak, I turned around, ran through the kitchen and straight out the back. It was too soon, I told myself. I went to the party telling myself that if Hannah Baker showed up, I was going to talk to her. It was time. I didn't care who was there. I was going to keep my eyes focused on her. And we were going to talk. And then she walked in and I freaked out. I couldn't believe it. Out of the blue, there you were. No, not out of the blue. First I paced around the backyard, cursing myself for being such a scared little boy. Then I let myself out through the gate, fully intent on walking home. But on the sidewalk, I beat myself up some more. Then I walked back to the front door. The drunk people greeted me again, and I went straight for you. It was anything but out of the blue. I don't know why, he said, but I think we need to talk. It took all the guts in the world to keep that conversation going. Guts and 2 plastic cups of beer. And I agreed, with probably the dumbest smile plastered on my face. No, the most beautiful. And then I noticed the door farm behind you, leading into the kitchen. It had a bunch of pen and pencil marks scratched onto it, keeping track of how fast the children in the house were growing. And I remembered watching my mom erase those marks in our old kitchen door. Yeah, and I remember my mom erased those marks on our old kitchen door, getting ready to sell the house to move here. I saw that. I saw something in your eyes when you looked over my shoulder. Anyway, you looked at my empty cup, poured half of your drink into mine, and asked if now would be a good time to talk. Please don't read into people like that. Yes, it sounds all smooth and get the girl drunk, but it wasn't. It didn't seem that way to me. It wasn't. No one's going to buy that, but it's true. Because if that was the case, he would have encouraged me to fill my cup all the way. So we walked into the living room, where one side of the couch was occupied by Jessica Davis and Justin Foley. But there was plenty of room on the other end. So we sat down. And what was the first thing we did? We set down our cups and started talking. Just like that. She had to know it was them, Jessica and Justin. But she didn't say their names. The first boy she kissing the girl who slapped her at Monet's. It was like she couldn't escape her past. Everything I could have hoped for was happening. The questions were personal, as if catching up for the time we let pass. Yet, the questions never felt intrusive. Her voice, if physically possible, comes through the headphones feeling warm. I placed cupped hands over my ears to keep her words from escaping. And they weren't intrusive, because I wanted you to know me. It was wonderful. I couldn't believe Hannah and I were finally talking. really talking, and I did not want to stop it. And I did not want it to stop. I loved talking with you, Hannah. It seemed like you could know me, like you could understand anything I told you. And the more we spoke, I knew why. The same things excited us, the same things concerned us. You could have told me anything, Hannah. That night, nothing was off limits. I would have stayed till you opened up and let everything out. But you didn't. I wanted to tell you everything. And that hurt because some things were too scary. Some things even I didn't understand. How could I tell someone I was really talking to for the first time, everything I was thinking? I couldn't. It was too soon. But it wasn't. Or maybe it was too late. But you're telling me now. Why did you wait till now? Her words, they're not warm anymore. She might want me to hear them that way, but they're burning me up instead. In my mind, in my heart. Clay, you kept Clay, you kept saying that you knew things would flow easily between us. You felt that way for a long time, you said. You knew we'd get along, that we would connect. But how? You never explained that. How could you know? Because I knew what people said about me. I heard all the rumors and lies that will always be a part of me. I knew they weren't true, Hannah. I mean, I hoped they weren't true, but I was too afraid to find out. I was breaking. If only I'd talked to you sooner. We could have, I don't know. But things had gone too far by then. My mind was set. Not on ending my life. Not yet. It was set on floating through school. On never being close to anyone. That was my plan. I'd graduate, then I'd leave. But then I went to a party. I went to a party to meet you. Why did I do that? To make myself suffer? Because that's what I was doing. Hating myself while waiting so long. Hating myself because it wasn't fair to you. The only thing that's not fair are these tapes, Hannah. Because I was there for you. We were talking. You could have said anything. I would have listened to absolutely anything. The couple sitting beside us on the couch. The girl was drunk and laughing and bumping into me every so often, which was funny at first, but it got old real fast. Why isn't Hannah saying her name? I started to think maybe she wasn't so drunk after all. Maybe it was all a show for the guy she was talking with when they were actually talking. Maybe she wanted the couch all to herself and the guy. So Clay and I left. Okay, let me just adjust myself. So Clay and I left. We walked around the party, shouting over the music wherever we went. Eventually, successfully, I spun the conversation around. No more big and heavy topics. We needed to laugh. But everywhere we went was too noisy to hear each other. So we wound up in the doorway to an empty room. I remember everything that happened next. I remember it perfectly. But how does she remember it? Well, we were standing there, our backs against the door frame, drinks in hand. We couldn't stop laughing. And yet the loneliness I entered the party with came rushing back. But I wasn't alone, I knew that. And for the first time in a long time, I was connected with another person from school. How in the world was I alone? You weren't. Hannah, I was there. Because I wanted to be. That's all I can say. It's all that makes sense to me. How many times had I let myself connect with someone only to have it thrown back in my face? Everything seemed good, but I knew it had the potential to be awful. Much, much more painful than others. There was no way that was going there was no way that was going to happen. So there you were, letting me connect with you, and when I couldn't do that anymore, I pulled the conversation to lighter topics. You made me laugh, and you were hilarious, Clay. You were exactly what I needed. So I kissed you. No, I kissed you, Hannah. A long and beautiful kiss. And what did you say when we came up for air? With the cutest little boyish smirk, you asked, "What was that for?" Right, you kissed me. To which I said, "You're such an idiot." And we kissed some more. An idiot. Yes, I remember that too. Eventually, we shut the door and moved deeper into the room. We were on one side of the door. Yeah, we were on one side of the door, and the rest of the party, with its loud but muffled music, was on the other. Amazing. We were together, and that's what I kept thinking the whole time. Amazing. I had to concentrate so hard to keep that word from spilling out of my mouth. Some of you may be wondering, how come we never heard about this? We always found out who Hannah made out with. Because I never told. Wrong. You only thought you found out. Haven't you been listening? Or did you only pay attention to the tape with your name on it? Because I can count on one hand, yes, one hand, how many people I've made out with. But you probably thought I'd need both hands and both feet just to get started, right? What's that? You don't believe me? You shocked? Guess what? I don't care. The last time I cared about anyone, the last time I cared what anyone thought about me was that night. And that was the last night. I unbuckle my seatbelt and lean forward. I clasp my hand over my mouth and squeeze to keep from screaming. But I do scream. The sound dampened in the palm of my hand, and Tony keeps driving. Now, get comfortable, because I'm about to tell you what happened in that room between Clay and me. Are you ready? We kissed. That's it. We kissed. I look down at my lap, at the Walkman. It's too dark to see the spindles behind the plastic window, pulling the tape from one side to the other. But I need to focus on something, so I try. And concentrating on the spot where the two spindles should be is the closest I get to looking into Hannah's eyes as she tells me my story. It was wonderful, both of us lying on the bed, one of his hands resting on my hip, his other hand cradling my head like a pillow, both of my arms hugging him, trying to pull him closer. And speaking for myself, I wanted more. That's when I said it. That's when I whispered to her, "I'm so sorry." Because inside, I felt so happy and sad at the same time. Sad that it took me so long to get there, but happy that we got there together. The kisses felt like first kisses. Kisses that said I could start over if I wanted to, with him. But start over from what? And that's when I thought of you, Justin. For the first time in a long time, I thought of our first kiss. My real first kiss. I remember the anticipation leading up to it. I remembered your lips pressing against mine. And then I remembered how you ruined it. Stop, I told Clay. And my hand stopped, pulling him in. You pushed your hands against my chest. Could you feel what I was going through, Clay? Did you sense it? You must have. No. You hid it. You never told me what it was, Hannah. I shut my eyes so tight it was painful. Trying to push away all that I was seeing in my head. And what I saw was everyone on the list. And more. Everyone up to that night. Everyone who caused me to be so intrigued by Clay's reputation. How his reputation was so different from mine. No, we were the same. And I couldn't help that. What everyone thought of me was out of my control. Clay, your reputation deserved better. But mine was not. And there I was with you, adding to my reputation. But it wasn't like that. Who was I going to tell, Hannah? Stop, I repeated. This time I moved my hands under your chest and pushed you away. I turned to the side, burying my face in the pillow. You started to talk, but I made you stop. I asked you to leave. You started to talk again, and I screamed into the pillow. And then you stopped talking. You heard me. The bed lifted on your side as you got up to leave the room. But it took you forever to leave, to realize that I was serious. I was hoping you'd tell me to stop again, to stop leaving. Even though my eyes remained shut, buried in the pillow, the night changed when you finally opened the door. It grew brighter, then it faded again, and you were gone. Why did I listen? Why did I leave her there? She needed me, and I knew that. But I was scared. Once again, I let myself get scared. And then I slid off the bed and down the floor. I just sat there beside the bed, hugging my knees and crying. That, Clay, is where your story ends. But it shouldn't have. I was there for you, Hannah. You should have reached out, but you didn't. You chose this. You had a choice and you pushed me away. I could have helped you. I wanted to help you. You left the room and we never spoke again. Your mind was set. No matter what you say, it was set. In the hallways at school, you tried catching my eye, but I always looked away. Because that night when I got home, I tore a page from my notebook and wrote down one name after another, the names in my head when I stopped kissing you. There were so many names, Clay. 3 dozen, at least. And then I made the connections. I circled your name first, Justin. Then I drew a line from you to Alex. I circled Alex and drew a line to Jessica, bypassing names that didn't connect, that just floated there. Incidents all by themselves. My anger and frustration with all of you turned to tears and then back to anger and hate every time I found a new connection. And then I reached Clay. The reason I went to the party. I circled his name and drew a line back to a previous name. It was Justin. In fact, Clay, soon after you left and shut the door, that person reopened it. On Justin's tape, first tape, she said his name would reappear, and he was at that party, on the couch with Jessica. But that person's already received the tapes. So Clay, just skip him when you pass them on. In a roundabout way. He caused a new name to be added on this list. To this list. And that's who should receive the tapes from you. And yes, Clay, I'm sorry too. Stop. My eyes sting. Not from the salt of my tears, but because I haven't closed them since learning Hannah cried when I left the room. Every muscle in my neck burns to turn away, to look out the window, away from the Walkman, and let my eyes stare into nothing. I can't bring myself to move, to break the effects of her words. Tony slows the car and pulls over to the curb. You okay? It's a residential street, but it's not the street of the party. I shake my head no. Are you going to be okay? He asks. I lean back, resting my head against the seat, and close my eyes. I miss her. I miss her too, he says. And when I open my eyes, his head is down. Is he crying? Or maybe trying not to cry? The thing is, I say, I never really missed her till now. He sits back in his seat and looks over at me. I didn't know what to make of that night. Everything that happened, I'd liked her for so long from far away, but I never had a chance to tell her. I looked down at the Walkman. We only had one night, and by the end of that night, it seemed like I knew her even less than before. But now I know. I know where her mind was that night. Now I know what she was going through. My heart breaks, and in that break comes a flood of tears. Tony doesn't respond. He looks out the empty street, allowing me to sit in his car and just miss her. To miss her each time I pull in a breath of air. To miss her with a heart that feels so coldly by itself, but warm when thoughts of her flow through me. I wipe the cough off my jacket, under my eyes. Then I choke back my tears and laugh. Thanks for listening to all that, I say. Next time, it's okay to stop me. Tony turns on the blinker, looks over his shoulder, and pulls us back into the street. But he doesn't look at me. You're welcome. Okay. And now we go on to the next chapter. We're gonna go at it. I think I can read this one and the next one. But I'm just gonna stick to this one for right now. This one, I will say, trigger warning. There's some deep topics coming. Well, this one is about a sexual assault. I'm not going to tell you with who. But for those of you listening, this might be a tough one. So I'm just going to say that. And as we get closer to it, I will tell you. Okay. So, respectively, this is called Cassette 5, Side B. It feels like we've driven the same road multiple times since leaving Rosie's. Like he's stalling for time. Were you at that party Were you at the party? I ask. Tony looks out of his side window and changes lanes. No. No. Clay, I need to know that you're going to be alright. Impossible to answer. Because no, I didn't push her away. I didn't add to her pain or do anything to hurt her. Instead, I left her alone in that room. The only person who might have been able to reach out and save her from herself. To pull her back to wherever she was heading. I did what she asked and I left. When I should have stayed. No one blames me. Oh, hold on. I just need to get my laptop charger because it's looking a little low. We're definitely going to finish this book probably next session or the session after that. Where was I? No one blames me, I whisper. I needed to hear it said aloud. I need to hear the words in my ears and not just in my head. No one blames me. No one, Tony says, his eyes still on the road. What about you? I ask. We approach a four-way stop and slow down. For a moment, from the corner of his eye, he looks at me. Then he returns his gaze to the road. No, I don't blame you. But why you? I ask. Why did she give you the other set of tapes? Let me drive you to the party house, he says. I'll tell you there. You can't tell me now? His smile is weak. I'm trying to keep us on the road. Clay. Soon after Clay left, the couple from the couch walked into the bedroom. Actually, stumbled into the bedroom is more accurate. Remember them? I thought she was acting drunk, bumping into me so we'd get up and leave. Unfortunately, it wasn't an act. She was smashed. I passed them in the hall. One of Jessica's arms lay flopped over Justin's shoulders. The other one groped for the wall to steady herself. Of course, I didn't actually see them come in. I was still on the floor, my back against the far side of the bed, and it was dark. When I walked out of the room, I felt so frustrated, so confused. I leaned against the piano in the living room, almost needing it to hold myself up. What should I do? Stay? Leave? But where would I go? Her sofa buddy kept her from stumbling too hard into the nightstand, and then she rolled off the bed twice. He lifted her back on. Nice guy that he was. He kept laughter at a minimum. I thought he might tuck her in and shut the door behind him as he left, and that would be the perfect time for my getaway. End of story. Hannah wasn't my first kiss, but the first kiss that mattered. The first kiss with someone who mattered. And after talking with her for so long that night, I assumed it was just the beginning. Something was happening between us. Something right. I felt it. But that's not the end of the story. Because it wouldn't make for a very interesting tape, now would it? And by now, I'm sure you knew it wasn't the end. Still, with no destination in mind, I left the party. Instead of leaving, he started kissing her. I know, some of you would have easily stayed for such an amazing, voyeuristic opportunity. A close encounter of the sexual kind. Even if you never saw it, at least you'd hear it. But two things kept me down on that floor. With my forehead pressed against my knees, I realized how much I must have drunk. I must have drank that night, and with my balance not what it should have been, to run across the floor, a, felt a little hazardous. So that's one excuse. Excuse number two is that things seem to be winding down up there. Not only was she drunk and clumsy, she seemed to be completely unresponsive. From what I could tell, it didn't go much beyond kissing, and it seemed to be one-sided kissing at that. Again, nice guy that he was, he didn't take advantage of the situation. He wanted to. He tried for the longest time to get a reaction out of her. Are you still awake? Do you want me to take you to the bathroom? Are you gonna puke? This girl was totally passed out. She grunted and moaned a bit. It dawned on him, finally, that she wasn't in a romantic mood and probably wouldn't be for a while. So he tucked her in and he'd check on her and said he'd check on her in a bit, and then he left. At this point, you might be wondering, who are these people, Hannah? Who are these people? Hannah, you forgot to tell us their names. But I didn't forget. If there's one thing I've still got, it's my memory. Which is too bad. Maybe if I forget things once in a while, we'd all be a little happier. The mist was heavy when I left the party, and as I walked through the neighborhood, it started to drizzle. Then rain. But when I first started walking, it was just a thick mist that left everything sort of hazy. No. You'll have to wait for a name on this one. Though, if you've been paying close attention, I gave you the answer a long time ago. Hold on. Yeah. I gave you the answer a long time ago. Before I say his name out loud, this guy needs to stew a bit, to remember everything that happened in that room. And he remembers. I know he does. I would love to see his face right now. His eyes shut tight, jaw clenched, fists pulling out his hair. And to him, I say, deny it. Go on. Deny that I was ever in that room. Deny that I know what you did. Or not what you did, but what you didn't do. What you allowed to happen. Rationalize why this isn't the tape you're making a return appearance on. It must be a later tape. It has to be a later tape. Oh, really? And you'd like that? A later tape that would make things better? Don't bet on it. God, what else could have gone wrong that night? I know she wasn't your girlfriend, that you hardly ever talked to her or barely even knew her. But is that your best excuse for what happened? Oh, so interesting. In the series, Justin and Jessica had actually been going out for 3 months at this point. So they were full-on couple. Huh. Interesting. I know she wasn't your girlfriend, that you hardly ever talked to her and barely even knew her, but is that your best excuse for what happened next? Or is that your only excuse? Either way, there is no excuse. I stood up, stabilizing myself with one hand on the bed. Your shoes, the shadow of your shoes were still visible in the light coming under the door, because when you left that room, you took up post right outside. And I let go of the bed and started walking toward that sliver of light, not sure what I'd say to you when I opened the door. But halfway there, two more shoes came into view, and I stopped. When I left the party, I just walked several blocks, not wanting to go home, not wanting to go back. The door the door opened and you pulled it back and said, "No, let her rest." In that tiny burst of light, I saw a closet, its accordion doors halfway open. Meanwhile, your friend was convincing you to let him in that room. I waited, heart pounding, trapped in the middle of the floor. The bedroom door opened again. But again, you pulled it shut, and you tried to make a joke of it. "Trust me," you said. "She won't move. She'll just lay there." And what was his response? What was it? What was his reasoning for you to step aside and let him in that room? Do you remember? Because I do. It was the night shift. You told him he was working the night shift. He told you he was working the night shift and had to leave in a few minutes. A few minutes, that's all he needed with her. So just relax and step aside. And that's all it took for you to let him in, to let him open the door. God. Pathetic. I couldn't believe it. And your friend couldn't believe it either. Because when he grabbed the doorknob again, he didn't rush right in. He waited for you to protest. Oh shit, so in the book, Justin's even more of a dick. In the series, he didn't want this person coming into the room. But they were really good buddies, and this guy forced himself in the room and he locked the door. So this is a completely different thing. Huh. That's interesting. And I couldn't believe it. And your friend couldn't believe it either. Because when he grabbed the doorknob again, he didn't rush right in. He waited for you to protest. In that brief moment, the moment you said nothing, I fell on my knees, sick, covering my mouth with both hands. I stumbled toward the closet, tears blurring the light from the hall. And when I collapsed in the closet, a pile of jackets on the floor caught me. When the bedroom door opened, I pulled the closet door shut, and I shut my eyes tight. Blood pounded in my ears. I rocked back and forth, beating my forehead into the pile of jackets. But with the bass pumping throughout the house, no one heard me. Just relax. Those words. He said it before. Just relax. Those words. He said it before. It's what he always says to people he's taken advantage of. Girlfriends, guys, whoever. It's Bryce. It has to be Bryce. It has to be. Bryce Walker was in that room. And with the bass thumping, no one heard him walking across the room. Getting on the bed. Now is as good a time as ever to say, trigger warning. Do not listen to this if you're pretty triggered or have dealt with this, or if you're just, this triggers you in any way, do not stop listening. Do stop listening. Take care of yourself. And with the bass thumping, no one heard him walking across the room. walking across the room, getting on the bed, the bed springs screaming under his weight. No one heard a thing, and I could have stopped it. If I could have talked, I could have seen. If I could have talked, if I could have seen, if I could have thought about anything, I would have opened those doors and stopped it. But I didn't, and it doesn't matter what my excuse was. That my mind was in a meltdown, and that my mind was in a meltdown is no excuse. I have no excuse. I could have stopped it. End of story. But to stop it, I felt like I'd have to stop the entire world from spinning. Like things had been out of control for so long that whatever I did hardly mattered anymore. And I couldn't stand all the emotions anymore. I wanted the world to stop, to end. For Hannah, the world did end. But for Jessica, it didn't. It went on. Hold on just 1 second. My... Oh no. My fan just turned off. Mom just like, no, you're staying on forever. Because it's still hot outside. Yeah. For Hannah, the world did end. But for Jessica, it didn't. But for Jessica, it didn't. It went on, and then Hannah hit her with these tapes. I don't know how many songs went by with my face buried in those jackets. The beats kept sliding from one song to another. After a while, my throat felt so scratched, so raw and burning. Had I been screaming? With my knees on the floor, I felt vibrations whenever anyone walked down the hall, and when footsteps fell within the room. Several songs after he entered the room, I pressed my back against the closet wall, waiting for the closet doors to be torn open, to be yanked out of my hiding place, and then, what would he do to me then? Tony's car pulls over. The front tire scrapes the curb. I don't know how we got here, but the house is right outside my window. The same front door where I entered the party. The same front porch where I left. And to the same porch, a window. Behind that window, a bedroom, and a closet with accordion doors where Hannah, on the night I kissed her, disappeared. But the light from the hallway seeped into the room, into the closet, and his footsteps walked away. It was over. After all, he couldn't be late for work, could he? So what happened next? Well, I ran out of the room and straight down the hall, and that's where I saw you, sitting in a room all by yourself. The person this whole tape revolves around, Justin Foley. My stomach lurches and I fling open the car door. Sitting on the edge of the bed with the lights turned off. There you were, sitting there, staring at nothing, while I stood in the hallway, frozen, staring at you. We had come a long way, Justin. From the first time I watched you slip on Kat's lawn, to my first kiss at the bottom of the slide, to now. First, you started a chain of events that ruined my life. Now, you were working on hers. Outside that very same house, I throw up. I keep my body hunched over, my head hanging over the gutter. Eventually, you turn my way. The color in your face, gone. Your expression, gone. And your eyes looked so exhausted. Or was it pain I saw there? Stay there as long as you want, Tony says. Don't worry, I think. I won't puke. Don't worry. I don't think I will. Don't worry, I think. I won't puke in your car. Justin, baby, I'm not blaming you entirely. We're in this one together. We both could have stopped it. Either one of us. We could have saved her. And I'm admitting this to you. To all of you. That girl had 2 chances. And both of us let her down. The breeze feels good on my face, cooling the sweat on my forehead and neck. So why is this tape about Justin? What about the other guy? Isn't what he did worse? Yes, absolutely. But the tapes need to be passed on, and if I sent them to him, they would stop. Think about it. He raped a girl and would leave town in a second if he knew. Well, if he knew that we knew. Still hunched over. Yeah. Think about it. He raped a girl and would leave town in a second if he knew. Well, if he knew that we knew. Pause. Still hunched over. I breathe in as fully as possible. Then I hold it and release. Breathe, then hold, release. I sit upright in the seat, keeping the door open and just in case. Why you? I ask. Why do you have these tapes? What did you do? A car drives by and we both watch it turn left 2 blocks away. It's another minute before Tony answers. Nothing, he says, and that's the truth. For the first time since approaching me at Rosie's, Tony addresses me eye to eye, and in his eyes, catching the light from a lamppost half a block away, I see tears. Finish this tape, Clay, and I'll explain everything. I don't answer. Finish it. You're almost done, he says. Play. So, what do you think of him now, Justin? Do you hate him? Your friend raped her. Is he still your friend? Yes. But why? It must be denial. It has to be. Sure, he always had a temper. Sure, he goes through girls like used underwear. But he's always been a good friend to you. And the more you hang out with him, the more he seems like the same old guy from before, right? And if he acts like the same guy, then he couldn't possibly have done anything wrong, which means that you didn't do anything wrong either. Great! That's great news, Justin. Because if you didn't do anything wrong and you didn't do anything wrong, because if you didn't do anything wrong and you didn't do anything wrong, then I didn't do anything wrong. And you have no idea how much I wish I didn't ruin that girl's life. But I did. At the very least, I helped. And so did you. No, you're right. You didn't rape her. And I didn't rape her. He did. You and I, we let it happen. It's our fault. Stop. Full story, I say. What happened? I pull the 6th tape from my pocket and swap it with the one inside the Walkman. I feel like we could go for... Fuck it. Let's do it. I still have another hour. I'm calling another hour. Okay. There's no trigger warning for this, but it is quite sad. Okay, so respectively, did I even do... Oh yeah, I did. Respectively, this chapter is called Cassette 6, Side A. Let me get some water. Yeah, Cassette 6, Side A. Tony takes the Tony takes the keys out of the ignition. Something to hold onto while he talks. I've been trying to figure out how to say this the whole time we've been driving. The whole time we've been sitting here. Even when you were puking your guts out. You noticed I didn't puke in your car? I did. He smiles, flicking down at his keys. Thanks, I appreciate that. I close the car door. My stomach is settling. She came over to my house, Tony says. Hannah. And that was my chance. For what? Clay. The signs were all there, he says. I had my chance too, I tell him. I take off the headphones and hang them on my knee. At the party, she was freaking out when we kissed, and I didn't know why. That was my chance. Inside the car, it's dark and quiet. With the windows rolled up, the outside world seems deep asleep. We're all to blame, he says. At least a little. So she came over to your house? I say. With her bike. The one she always rode to school. The blue one, I say. Let me guess, you were working on your car. He laughs. You would have thought, right? But she never came over to my house before, so I was a little surprised. You know, we were friendly at school, so I didn't think too much of it. What was weird, though, was why she came over. Why? He looks out the side window, and his chest fills with air. She came over to give me her bike. The words sit there, undisturbed, for an uncomfortably long time. She wanted me to have it, he says. She was done with it. When I asked for a reason, she just shrugged. She didn't have one, but it was a sign, and I missed it. I summarize a bullet point from the handout at school. Giving away possessions. Tony nods. She said I was the only one she could think of who might need it. I drive the oldest car at school, she said, and she thought if it ever broke down, I might need a backup. But this baby never breaks down, I say. This thing always breaks down, he says. I'm just always around to fix it. So I told her that I couldn't take her bike, not without giving her something in return. What did you give her? I'll never forget this, he says, and he turns to look at me. Her eyes clay. They never looked away. She just kept looking straight into my eyes and started crying. She just stared at me, and tears began streaming down her face. He wipes away tears from his own eyes and wipes a hand across his upper lip. I should have done something. The signs were all there. All over for anyone willing to notice. What did she ask for? She asked me how I made tapes. The ones I play in my car. He leans his head back and takes a deep breath. So I told her about my dad's old tape recorder. He pauses. And she asked if I had anything to record voices. God. Like a handheld recorder or something. Something you didn't have to plug in but could walk around with. And I didn't ask why. I told her to wait right there and I'd get one. And you gave it to her? He turns to me, his face hard. I didn't know what she was going to do with it, Clay. Wait, I'm not accusing you, Tony, but she didn't say anything about why she wanted it? If I had asked, do you think she would have told me? No. By the time she went to Tony's house, her mind was made up. If she wanted someone to stop her, to rescue her from herself, I was there, at the party, and she knew it. I shake my head. She wouldn't have told you. A few days later, he says, when I get home from school, there's a package sitting on my porch. I take it up to my room and start listening to the tapes, but it doesn't make any sense. Did she leave you a note or anything? No, just the tapes. But it didn't make any sense because Hannah and I had third period together, and she was at school that day. What? So when I got home and started listening to the tapes, I went through them so fast-forwarding them to find out if I was on them, but I wasn't. And that's when I knew she'd given me the second set of tapes. So I looked her up and called her house, but no one answered. So I called her parents' door. I asked if Hannah was there, and they asked if everything was all right because I'm sure I sounded crazy. What did you say? I told them that something was wrong and they needed to find her, but I couldn't make myself tell them why. He takes a thin, jagged breath of air, and the next day at school, she wasn't there. I want to tell him I'm sorry, that I can't imagine what it must have been like, but then I think of tomorrow at school and realize I'll find out soon enough, seeing the other people on these tapes for the first time. I went home early that day, he says, pretending I was sick, and I've got to admit it, it took me a few days to pull myself together. But when I returned, Justin Foley looked like hell. Then Alex, and I thought, okay, most of these people deserve it, so I'm going to do what she asked and make sure you all hear what she has to say. But how are you keeping track? I asked. How did you know I had the tapes? You were easy, he says. You stole my Walkman, Clay. We both laugh, and it feels good. A release, like laughing at a funeral. Maybe inappropriate, but definitely needed. But everyone else, they were a little trickier, he says. I'd run to my car after the last bell and drive as close to the front lawn of the school as possible. When I saw whoever was next, a couple days later, I knew the last person. When I saw whoever was next, a couple days after, I knew the last person who had heard the tapes. Yeah. And what's funny is that she left him no note or instructions on what to do. But in the series, she left him instructions of what to do. I'm just like, wow. And here, he just knew. Yeah, he just knew what to do. But everyone else, they were a little trickier, he says. I'd run to my car after the last bell and drive as close to the front lawn of the school as possible. When I saw whoever was next, a couple days after I knew the last person had the tapes, I'd call out his name and wave him over. Or her. I'd wave her over. And then you just asked if they had the tapes? No. They would have denied it, right? No, they would have denied it, right? So I'd hold up a tape when they got close and tell them to get in, because I had a song I wanted them to hear. every time based on their reaction. I knew. And then you'd play one of the and then you'd play one of her tapes? No. If they didn't run away, I'd have to do something. So I'd play them a song, he says. Any song. They would sit there where you are, wondering why in the hell I was playing them this song. But if I was right, their eyes would glaze over, like they were a million miles away. So why you? I asked. Why'd she give you the tape? Why'd she give the tapes to you? I don't know, he says. The only thing I can think of is because I gave her the recorder. She thought I had a stake in it and would play along. You're not one of them, but you're still a part. He faces the windshield and grips the steering wheel. I've got to go. I didn't mean anything by that, I say. Honest. I know, but it's late. My dad's gonna start wondering if I broke down somewhere. What? You don't want him messing under your hood again? I grab the door handle and then, remembering, let go and pull out my phone. I need you to do something. Can you say hello to my mom? Sure. I scroll through the list of names, hit send, and she picks up right away. Clay? Hey, Mom. Clay, where are you? She sounds hurt. I told you I might be late out. I know you did. I was just hoping to hear from you by now. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna need a little longer. I may need to stay at Tony's tonight. Right on cue. Hello, Mrs. Jensen? She asks if I've been drinking. Mom, no, I swear. Okay, well, if this is for his history project, right? I flinch. She wants to believe my excuses so bad. Every time I lie, she wants to believe me so much. I trust you, Clay. I tell her I'll be home before school to get my stuff, and then we hang up. Where are you going to stay? Tony asks. I don't know. I'll probably go home. But I don't want her to worry if I don't. He turns the key, the engine starts, and he flips on the headlights. Do you want me to take you somewhere? I grab the door handle and nod toward the house. This is where I'm at in the tapes, I say, but thanks. His eyes stare straight ahead. Honestly, thank you, I say. And when I say it, I mean it more. And when I say it, I mean it for more than just the ride, for everything. For how he reacted when I broke down and cried, for trying to make me laugh on the most horrible night of my life. It feels good knowing someone understands what I'm listening to, what I'm going through. Somehow it makes it not as scary to keep. Somehow it makes it not as scary to keep listening. I got out of the car and shut the door. His car pulls away. I press play. Play. Back to the party, everyone. But don't get too comfy. We'll be leaving in just a minute. Half a block away, Tony's Mustang stops at an intersection, takes a left, and drives away. If time was a string connecting all of your stories, that party would be the point where everything knots up. And that knot keeps growing and growing, getting more and more tangled, dragging the rest of your stories into it. When Justin and I finally broke that awful, painful stare, I wandered down the hall and back into the party, staggered in, really. But not from the alcohol, from everything else. I sit on the curb, a few feet from where I vomited out of Tommy's car, Tony's car. If whoever lives here, because I have no idea whose party it was, wants to come out and ask me to leave, I welcome it. Please do. I grabbed for the piano in the living room, then the piano bench, and I sat. I wanted to leave, but where would I go? I couldn't go home, not yet. And wherever I went, how how would I get there? I was too weak to walk. At least I thought I was too weak. But in truth, I was too weak to try. The only thing I knew for certain was that I wanted to get out of here. Was that I wanted to get out of there and not think about anything or anyone anymore. Then a hand touched my shoulder, a gentle squeeze. It was Jenny Kurtz. Okay. I know this. In the series, she's not called Jenny, she's called Sherry. So it's gonna be a little, like, weird for me to say Jenny. Because my headcanon is Sherry. So I'm not gonna say Sherry out of respect for the original book, but it will be weird to me. It was Jenny Kurtz, the cheerleader from the student body office. Jenny, this one's for you. I dropped my head down to my knees. Jenny asked if I needed a ride home, and I almost laughed. Was it so obvious? Did I look that terrible? So I looped my arm in hers, and she helped me up, which felt good, letting someone help me. I walked out of the front door, through a crowd either passed out on the porch or smoking in the yard. Somewhere at that moment, I was walking from block to block, trying to figure out why I'd left that party, trying to understand what had just happened between me and Hannah. The sidewalk was damp, my feet numb and heavy, shuffled across the pavement. I listened to the sound of every pebble and leaf that I stepped on. I wanted to hear them all, to block out the music and the voices inside me. Just blocks away, I could still hear that music, distant, muffled, like I couldn't get far enough away. And I could still remember every song that played. Jenny, you didn't say a thing. You didn't ask me any questions, and I was so grateful. Maybe you've had things happen or seen things happen at parties that you just couldn't discuss. Not right away at least. Which is sort of fitting, because I haven't discussed any of this until now. Well, no. I tried. I tried once, but he didn't want to hear it. Is that the 12th story? The 13th? Or something else entirely? Is it one of the names written on her paper that she won't tell us about? So, Jenny, you led me to your car, and even though my thoughts were somewhere else, my eyes focused on nothing. I felt your touch. You held my arm in such a tenderness. You held my arm with such a tenderness as you lowered me into the passenger seat. You buckled me in, got in your seat, and we left. What happened next? I'm not entirely sure. I wasn't paying attention because in your car I felt secure. The air inside was warm and comforting, the wiper blades on a slow speed, gently pulling me out of my thoughts and into the car, into reality. The rain wasn't heavy, but it blurred the windshield just enough to keep everything dreamlike. And I needed that. It kept my world from becoming too real, too fast, and then it hit. There's nothing like an accident to bring the world crashing back. An accident? Another one? Two in one night? How come I never heard about this one? The front wheel on my side slammed into and jumped the curb. The wooden post smacked into your front bumper and snapped back like like a toothpick. God, no. A stop sign fell backward in your front headlights. It caught under your car and you screamed and slammed on the brakes. In the side mirror, I watched sparks fly onto the road as we slid to a stop. Okay, now I'm awake. We sat for a moment, staring through the windshield. No words, not a glance between us. The wiper smeared the rain from side to side, and my hand stayed gripped to my seatbelt. Thankfully, we only hit a sign. The accident with the old man and the guy from school. Did Hannah know? Ah! Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. The wiper smeared the rain from side to side, and my hand stayed gripped to my seatbelt. Thankfully, we only hit a sign. The accident with the old man and the guy from school. Did Hannah know? Did she know Jenny caused it? Your door opened and I watched you walk to the front of your car, then crouch between the headlights for a closer look. You ran a hand over the dent and let your head droop forward. I couldn't tell if you were pissed or you were crying. Maybe you were laughing at how horrible the night was turning out to be. I know where to go. I don't need a map. I know exactly where the next star is. So I stand up and start walking. The dent wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't good, but you had to feel some relief. It could have been worse. It could have been much, much worse. For example, you could have hurt something else. She knows. Something alive. Whatever your initial thoughts, you stood up with a blank expression, standing there, staring at the dent, shaking your head. Then you caught my eye, and I'm sure I saw a frown, even if it lasted only a split second. Even if it lasted only a split second. But that frown turned into a smile, followed by a shrug. And what were the first words you said when you got back in the car? Well, that sucks. Then you put your key in the ignition, and I stopped you. I couldn't let you drive away. At the intersection where Tony turned left, I take a right. It's still 2 blocks away, but I know it's there. The stop sign. You shut your eyes and said, "Hannah, I'm not drunk." Well, I didn't accuse you of being drunk, Jenny, but I was wondering why the hell you couldn't keep your car on the road. It's raining, you said. And yes, true, it was. Barely. I told you to park the car. You told me to be reasonable. We both lived close by, and you'd stick to the residential streets, as if that made it any better. I see it. A metal pole holding up a stop sign. Its reflective letters visible even this far away. But on the night of the accident, it was a different sign. The letters weren't reflective, and the sign had been fastened to a wooden post. "Hannah, don't worry," you said. Then you laughed. "Nobody obeys stop signs anyway. They just roll on through." So now, nobody obeys stop signs anyway. They just roll on through. So now, because there isn't one there, it's legal, see? People will thank me. Again, I told you to park the car. We'd get a ride home from someone at the party. I'd pick you up first thing in the morning, and I'd drive you to your car. But you tried again. "Hannah, listen. Park it," I said. "Please." And then you told me to get out. But I wouldn't. I tried reasoning with you. You were lucky it was only a sign. Imagine what could happen if I let you drive us all the way home. But again, get out. I sat for a long time with my eyes shut, listening to the rain and the wipers. "Hannah, get out!" So finally, I did. I opened the car and stepped out, but I didn't shut it. I looked back at you, and you stared through your windshield, through the wipers, gripping the wheel. Still a block away, but the only thing I can focus on is the stop sign straight ahead. I asked if I could use your phone. I saw it sitting right below the stereo. "Why?" you asked. I'm not sure why I told you the truth. I could have lied. I should have lied. "We need to at least tell someone about the sign," I said. You kept your eyes straight ahead. "They'll trace it. They can trace phone calls, Hannah." Then you started up the car and told me to shut the door. I didn't. So you reversed the car, and I jumped back to keep the door from knocking me over. You didn't care that the metal sign was grating the underside of your car. When you cleared it, the sign lay at my feet, warped and streaked with silver scratches. You revved the engine, and I took the hint, stepping onto the curb. Then you peeled away, causing the door to slam shut, picking up speed the further you got, and you got away. In fact, you got away with much more than knocking down a sign, Jenny. And once again, I could have stopped it. Somehow. We all could have stopped it. We all could have stopped something. The rumors, the rape, you. There must have been something I could have said, but at the very least, I could have taken your keys. Or at the very, very least, I could have reached in and stolen your phone to call the police. Actually, that's the only thing that would have mattered. Because you found your way home in one piece, Jenny. But that wasn't the problem. The sign was knocked down. And that was the problem. B6 on your map. 2 blocks from the party, there's a stop sign. But on that night, for part of the night, there wasn't. And it was raining. And someone was trying to deliver his pizzas on time. And someone else, headed in the opposite direction, was turning. The old man. Oh, interesting. In the series, there's a guy called... I don't know what he's called, but he's a popular dude. But he's a popular jock, and he's really nice. I wonder if it says his name in here. But that jock was the one that died, and he was a friend to Clay. He was the one that was trying to get Clay to be more closer with Hannah. And he was at that party that night, and he was not drunk, and he went to go grab more beer, and that accident happened, and he died. But they say in the book it's just some random person. That's interesting. And someone was trying to deliver his pizzas on time, and someone else, headed in the opposite direction, was turning. The old man. There was no stop sign on that corner, not on that night, and one of the drivers died. No one knew who caused it. Not us, not the police. But Jenny knew, and Hannah, and maybe Jenny's parents, because someone fixed her bumper real fast. I never knew the guy in that car. He was a senior, and I saw his picture in the newspaper. I didn't recognize him. Just one of the many faces at school I never got to know, and never would. I didn't go to his funeral either. Yes, maybe I should have, but I didn't. I couldn't, and now I'm sure it's obvious why. She didn't know. Not about the man in the other car. She didn't know it was the man from her house, her old house, and I'm glad. Earlier, she watched him pull out of his garage. She watched him drive away without noticing her. But some of you were there, at his funeral. Driving to return a toothbrush. That's what his wife told me when we waited on her couch for the police to bring him home. He was driving on the other end of town. He was driving to the other end of town to return his granddaughter's toothbrush. They'd been keeping an eye on her while her parents were on vacation, and she'd left it behind by accident. The girl's parents said there was no need to drive across town just for that. They had plenty of extras. But that's what he does, his wife told me. That's the kind of person he is. And then the police came. For those of you who did go, let me describe what school was like on the day of his funeral. In a word, it was quiet. About a quarter of the school took the morning off. Mostly seniors, of course. But for those of us who did go to school, the teachers let us know that if we simply forgot to bring a note from home, they wouldn't mark us absent if we wanted to attend the funeral. Mr. Porter said funerals can be a part of the healing process, but I doubted that very much. Not for me, because on that corner, there wasn't a stop sign that night. Someone had knocked it over, and someone else, yours truly, could have stopped it. Two officers helped her husband inside, his body trembling. His wife got up and walked over to him. She wrapped him in her arms, and they cried. When I left, closing the door behind me, the last thing I saw was the two of them standing in the middle of the living room, holding each other. On the day of the funeral, so those of you who attended, on the day of the funeral, so those of you who attended wouldn't miss any work. The rest of us did nothing. In every class, the teachers gave us free time. Free to write, free to read, free to think. But what did I do? For the first time, I thought about my own funeral. More and more in very general terms. I had been thinking about my own death, just the fact of dying. But on that day, with all of you at a funeral, I began thinking of my own. I reached the stop sign. With the tips of my fingers, I reached toward it. With the tips of my fingers, I reached forward and touched the cold metal lamp. I reached the stop sign. With the tips of my fingers, I reached forward and touched the cold metal pole. I could picture life, school and everything continuing on without me, and I could not picture my funeral. Not at all. Mostly because I couldn't imagine who would attend or what they could say, or what they would say. I have no idea what you think of me. I don't know what people think of you either, Hannah. I don't know what people think of you either, Hannah. When we found out, and since your parents didn't have a funeral in this town, no one said much about it at all. I mean, it was there. You felt it. Your empty desk. The fact that you would not be coming back. But no one knew where to begin. No one knew how to start that conversation. Now it's been a couple weeks since the party. So far, Jenny, you've done a great job of hiding from me. I suppose that's understandable. You'd like to forget what we did, what happened with your car and the stop sign, the repercussions. But you never will. Maybe you don't know what people thought of you because they themselves didn't know what they thought of you. Wait. Maybe you didn't know what people thought of you because they themselves didn't know what they thought of you. Maybe you didn't give us enough to go on, Hannah. Maybe you didn't give us enough to go on, Hannah. If not, let me say that again. I don't feel like I said that right. Maybe you didn't give us enough to go on, Hannah. If not for that party, I never would have met the real you. But for some reason, and I am extremely grateful, you gave me that chance. Somehow, however brief it was, you gave me a chance, and I liked the Hannah I met that night. Maybe I could have even loved her. But you decided not to let that happen, Hannah. It was you who decided. Good night! I, on the other hand, only have to think about it for one more day. I turn away from the stop sign and walk away. If I had known two cars were going to crash on that corner, I would have run back to the party and called the cops immediately. But I never imagined that would happen. Never. So instead, I walked, but not back to the party. My mind was racing all over the place. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't walk straight. I want to look back, to look over my shoulder and see the stop sign with huge reflective letters, pleading with Hannah, stop. But I keep facing forward, refusing to see it as more than it is. It's a sign, a stop sign on a corner street, nothing more. I turned corner after corner with no idea where I was going. We walked those streets together, Hannah. Different routes, but at the same time. On the same night, we walked the streets to get away. Me from you, and you from the party. But not just from the party, from yourself. And then I heard tires squeal, and I turned, and I watched two cars collide. Eventually, I made it to a gas station, C7 on your map, and I used a payphone to call the police. As it rang, I found myself hugging the receiver, part of me hoping that no one would answer. I wanted to wait. I wanted the phone to keep ringing. I wanted life to stay right there, on pause. I can't follow her map anymore. I'm not going to the gas station. When someone finally did answer, I sucked in the tears that wet my lips and told them that on the corner of Tanglewood and South, but she cut me off. She told me to calm down, and that's when I realized how hard I had been crying and how much I was struggling to catch one good breath. I crossed the street and moved further away from the party house. Over the past few weeks, I've walked out of my way so many times. Yeah, over the past few weeks, I've walked out of my way so many times to avoid that house, to avoid the reminder, the pain, of my one night with Hannah Baker. I have no desire to see it twice in one night. She told me the cops had already been called and were on the way. I swing my backpack in front of me and pull out the map. I was shocked. I couldn't believe you actually called the police, Jenny. I unfold the map to give it one last look. But I shouldn't have been shocked, because it turns out you didn't call them. Then I crumple it up, crushing the map into a ball the size of my fist. At school the next day, when everyone replayed the events of what happened the previous night, that's when I found out who had called. And it wasn't to report a fallen sign. I stuffed the map deep into a bush and walk away. It was to report an accident caused by a fallen sign, an accident I was never aware of until then. But that night, after hanging up the phone, I wandered the streets some more, because I had to stop crying. Before I went home, I needed to calm down. If my parents caught me sneaking back in with tears in my eyes, they'd ask way too many questions. Unanswerable questions. That's what I'm doing now. Staying away. I wasn't crying the night of the party, but I was barely holding it back. I wasn't crying the night of the party, but I can barely hold it back now, and I can't go home. So I walked without thinking about which roads to take, and it felt good. The cold, the mist. That's what the rain had done. That's what the rain had turned into by then. A light mist. And I walked for hours, imagining the mist growing thick and swallowing me whole, The thought of disappearing like that so simply made me so happy. And that, as you know, never happened. Stop. I pop open the Walkman to flip the tape. I'm almost at the end. God, I, God. I let out a quivering breath, and closed my eyes. The end. And that is the end of that chapter. We will most likely finish. Oh yeah, no, we will definitely finish the book next time. Yeah, we will definitely finish the book next time. Okay. I read so much. I have read from 174 to 252. That's like 70 pages right there. More than 70 pages. I feel good about that. Because I wanted to read a lot. Because, I want to get this over with. And now we're past some of the worst part. Well, some of the worst parts. But thank you for listening. That was a pretty hard session to listen to. And the next one, the last one, it won't be easy either. But I will see you, maybe, later. Thank you. Bye-bye.